Hello, John.
Hey Mazzy, how you doing?
Great, great. Let's have you introduce this one.
Right, well, thank you for inviting me onto your channel. So the idea today is to talk about, well, pick 10 records each, all which have fantastic side one, track ones, great opening tracks. So it's the whole high fidelity thing, name your top five, side one, track one. So that's the idea. So literally 10 records each and off we go.
Here we go. All right. Well, since you did an introduction, I'll start this time. As usual, I'm doing sort of a hybrid here, and I wouldn't call it a cheat because I'm glad the second one was the first track, and you'll know probably right when I show the records before I even mention them, you'll know.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Great jazz record song from my father, and if you know Ricky, Don't Lose Your Number, what a great opening track, what a great riff. For years, I hadn't heard this. I didn't know this Horace Silver record. And maybe 10 years after, maybe not that much, but after I got Pretzel Logic with that great intro, I realized they lifted that exactly. Yeah. It's before the whole idea of mashups, as I recall, but they took it from songs from my father that dun, 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 dun. I mean, and I don't remember actually now that I wonder if they ever gave him a credit or what the publishing was on that. Probably not, right?
It's a great little gimmick though, isn't it? It's a great little gimmick on that tune.
It's great. And this is where, as a protector of copyright to a point, unless it's Eric Clapton, no, I'm just kidding there. Joke. Don't get your panties in a bunch out there, viewers. But it's Becker Fagan. It's a great little riff. It got people turned on to this record, or the people that, and these are just two great songs. This is a great song, obviously.
Yeah.
And this might be my favorite Steely Dan record. And of course, the whole jazz fusion and the East St. Louis Toodaloo on here, the Duke Ellington track is great. So, but I love the way this opens both these albums, that riff. It's sort of a medium tempo. And it's just really sweet. And
yeah,
that's my opening.
Yeah, good stuff. Nice pick. Right. So my first choice is the Doors debut. So obviously Break On Through. Now, I mean, obviously this is a perfect example. I mean, it's only I was looking earlier on, it's only 2 minutes, 25 seconds long, that tune. And it's a perfect introduction to this album, but not only the album, their entire career. I think, it pretty much says in 2 minutes, 25 seconds what the Doors were about. Whether that be musically or lyrically, it's all there in that song. So if anybody ever asked me, where to start with the Doors, start at the beginning. It's a great song and a great album. I do like all of the Doors records. Actually, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago. I particularly like the last two albums. I mean, obviously he passed away at 27, didn't he, Jim? But
the last with Jim. The last albums with Jim. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. So Morrison Hotel and LA Woman. I like his voice on those records, but
a little deeper, maybe. Yeah,
it is. He's clearly, he's obviously lived the life. He sounds older than his years, basically, on those records with his voice. But as a debut, I think this is a fantastic debut and a perfect opening track.
Before I go on, pardon me?
Did you ever see the Doors?
No, they're one of, I always talk about three bands, the three misses. That's my generation, but I kind of was young when they stopped really touring, but I missed the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, and the Beatles. I mean, right. Yeah, so it's funny. When you first said, let's do this track one, side one album, I thought of High Fidelity, the film, that scene with Jack Black, and when he's just ranting on it. And what he says in that, I think as I recall, he says something about, it's obvious that you're going to pick the Beatles or something. I'm not picking any Beatles here, and on purpose. But to me, I mean, you could go, and I'm just going to mention why not? Because Taxman, I mean, the Taxman, that opening with the 1, 2, 3, 4, of course, and the While My Guitar Gently Weeps, even Helping a Hard Day's Night, but when you first suggested we do this, the first track I thought of was Break On Through. That is to me one of my great opening. I just love that bass line. And it is so great. And that's when I was a kid, our band did that song because of that got me into the Doors aside from Light My
Right.
Fire. I just love it. So my my next pick, and there are a bunch, there are two I decided. There are obvious choices that are later on, because I tried at first not to do any obvious choices, but how can you not? I mean, come on. So we'll see when we get there. But this one, coincidentally, I just discovered today. We're recording this on the 9th of January.
Yeah.
Today, in 1967, this single was released, and that's "So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star" from the Byrds.
Yeah.
That great opening song with the percussive and that
Yeah.
great riff. It's got a great Hugh Masekela trumpet on there, which was really unique for them. It's kind of what I like it too. It's kind of a cynicky, mocking song about the Monkees in a way, or the whole idea of being this instant band, like you put a little milk and sugar and you have an instant rock and roll band or something. But it's a great track, and it opens this record. And this and Fifth Dimension are to me the two sweet spots for me in the Byrds career, that just added something beyond just the Dylan tracks, even though it has My Back Pages, and to me it's my favorite version of My Back Pages ever.
Yeah. I just say it's quite cynical, isn't it? It's quite a snide comment, but it's got so much attitude, that tune.
Oh,
It's
it's
got a lot of
great.
swagger about it, Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember reading. I think Derek Taylor, who was the Beatles publicist, also worked with the Byrds and the Beach Boys, and had recorded something at one of the Byrds concerts and used "That's the Screaming." Originally, when I was growing up, I always thought they got it from a Beatle concert, but everybody was screaming at bands in those days, I guess. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, good stuff. Right, okay. So my next choice is Bob Marley and the Wailers' Exodus. Now this must be, obviously it's one of the most famous reggae albums going. It's certainly one of the first reggae albums that I ever bought, albeit I bought it on CD. So I've only picked up this vinyl copy quite recently, and it is an album that you should listen to on vinyl because it naturally falls into two halves. So the first half, the first 5 tracks, very much roots reggae. Religion is a theme on most of them, spirituality. The second half of the record is very much pop music. So you've got stuff like Jamming, Waiting in Vain, Turn Your Lights Down Low, Three Little Birds, One Love, But it opens, side one opens with Natural Mystic. And it's, I say, again, a perfect opening to this album. It fades in, the song fades in, it almost whispers in, and it just locks into this very laid back groove. And although obviously there's a lot of roots reggae made in the 70s, a lot of great records, nobody was making roots reggae that sounded like Bob Marley, that sort of commercial sounding roots reggae. And this is a wonderful album. So that's a perfect opening as well. This is certainly his commercial high point, and for good reason. I mean, even if you haven't got this record, most people will have a copy or will have heard Legend, the best of, and sort of more than half of the album would be on that best of because there's so many singles off it. So it's a great album.
I love that album. Now, I did see Bob Marley and the Wailers. My guess was 76 at the Paramount Theater in Oakland, and it was one of those. It was really a unique experience. It was wonderful. It was great.
I'm jealous, Matty. I'd love to have seen those shows around that sort of time.
The only difference is I'm 20 years older than you or something. So it was the right time, right place, right?
Yeah.
So and all those sort of legacy boomer artists, whatever you want to call.
Yeah.
My next pick is actually something I would have picked out of it might be on your list actually. And I didn't pick it just because of you. And I knew the song before I even met you. So it goes way back again to 1968. And that this to me opens up one of my favorite Aretha albums is Chain of Fools.
Right.
And the guitar, it's just, so great. I discovered recently, I totally forgot that on one track, Eric Clapton's on this album, plays on one track.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either until I was sitting here. The guitar Obligado on Good to Me As I Am to You is by Eric Clapton of Cream. I had no idea until just this minute, literally. And I've had, this is that Rhino reissue. I do have one I got in the Coleman collection. It might even be mono, I think. But I mean, Chain of Fools, you probably know more about that song. Don Covey wrote it, or Covey.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Don Covey, yeah.
It's such a great song, right? I mean, this. I don't know which album is your favorite Aretha record, but this is probably up there.
Yeah,
But she's made a lot
definitely
of
one of
good
the best.
records. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with any of those late 60s, early 70s records. And there's a direct link with that to my next pick. So
That's what we like, the links.
that's right.
Everything
Yeah,
is
this is
linking.
synergy here. It's definitely synergy here. So I'm not gonna pick this record, but I do have this to hand. This is Aretha live at the Fillmore West. So this was recorded in 1971. So obviously this came out on Atlantic Records. And sorry, excuse me a minute, Basil. Sorry, my 5-year-old son, I've just put him to bed and he's just got out of bed to come and have a chat. So sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
No, so
We like
saying,
that.
you know,
What's his favorite first track? Okay.
well, I should have asked him. Well, I can tell you what it is because he's got a real thing for Daft Punk. So One More Time by Daft Punk, that would be his choice.
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So so 1971, this was recorded at the Fillmore West, and the band on this record also made this album. This is King Curtis live at the Fillmore West. So these were recorded the same year, 1971. And this opens with a track called Memphis Soul Stew, which you may well know. So it was a sort of big soul tune, big R&B tune in the 60s. And basically because it opens with that track, it pretty much opens with him introducing the band. So it comes in with this groovy little bass guitar played by Jerry Jamot. And then that plays for a few bars. And then in comes Bernard Purdie on the drums. A big funky, drum fill comes in, and that follows. Then comes in Cornel Dupree on guitar, lovely little guitar lick out of the top. Billy Preston then comes in, congas, and then you get King Curtis coming in as well. It's a perfect opening, a great, well, probably my favourite opening to any live record. It's absolutely perfect. Great band, and I say this is basically Aretha Franklin's backing band at this point. Now, Aretha Franklin's backing band, of course, were known as the Kingpins, and you'll know very well that they opened for the Beatles at Shea Stadium.
Yep.
So there's a Beatles link there as well for you, Mazzy.
Always a connection.
Always a connection, So, but this is a great album, and I mean, King Curtis, he must have, he was murdered, I think actually in 1971. So it wouldn't have been long after this album was made. But if you don't know this record, it's definitely worth picking up. A great live record, and as I say, it's a nice sort of companion piece to this album as well.
A couple of little things about those two albums. I do have both of them. I do have the King Curtis. My copy, I probably got, it's a mid 70s copy. So I picked it up when I was working in the store then. I know the Aretha Franklin album for a fact, that photography by Jim Marshall, who I knew. My guess is the King Curtis, because that's also San Francisco. My guess is Jim Marshall photographed that King Curtis cover. I could be wrong.
No, it may well be. I mean, on a production point of view, you've got Jerry Wexler and Arif Mardin producing the Aretha, and the
Right.
King Curtis produced by King Curtis and Arif Mardin. So there's a link again there, but I'm not sure about the photography.
And a near miss again. I was 16, 17, and a friend asked me to go to that Aretha show, one of the Aretha shows, and Ray Charles is on that record. Ray Charles is there.
Right.
I don't know why I didn't. I knew her from the singles, obviously from the late 60s. And I was just starting to go a couple years earlier. I think 69 was my first time at the Fillmore West. And for the Who, doing Tommy with the not Stan Kenton, one of those big bands, opening up for the Who, which is bizarre. But I wish I'd gone to that. I never saw Aretha. She's another one I missed, but whatever.
Yeah, I had tickets to see Aretha play in New Orleans, probably about 2010, and I planned my wife and I planned an entire trip to go there, and a couple of weeks before, and she cancelled, so I didn't get to see her either. So there you go.
Okay,
right.
Well, my next pick again. This is a live album, and to me, what makes this opening track great? Again, a lot of these songs, I realize, not all of them. It's an instrumental bit, like you with the bass on Break On Through. Or now is that, I can't remember on that. Was that the organ bass, because they brought in bass players occasionally, but it
Yeah,
sounds like an organ bass.
It's
Ray
Ray's,
Manzarek.
Ray's
It's
left
Ray.
hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, so.
Or a guitar riff like that Aretha Franklin. But what's great about this is not only the great guitar when the guitar comes in, but it's the intro by the artist stating his name better than anyone ever introduced himself, and that is, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." You know, Folsom Prison Blues. That introduction is so great. I don't know if you're a fan. Maybe I know you've done things with Headley, who's really into sort of folk rock and country, and there's a guy, Bill Callahan, I'm a big fan of, and his last album called Gold or Solid Gold or whatever it's called, at the very beginning goes, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash," and it's just a great opening as he's doing the acoustic intro. But this record, again, actually, this is not a Jim Marshall photograph, but he was there doing this and the San Quentin and all the photographs of the book. But this one picture is not a Jim Marshall, but love this record, obviously. And the two Prison albums sort of resuscitated his career. I mean, he was like not selling on Columbia at that point, and then the TV show and everything else. But what a great opener.
It's brilliant. I mean, I don't see that record around too often over here in the UK, original copies. I think it's a great album. The San Quentin album, I see around quite a lot. So I think it was actually televised on ITV, on commercial TV over here. So on the back of that, I think they must have pressed God knows how many copies of the San Quentin album. It must have done really well. And so
because of a boy named Sue.
Yeah, of course,
huge,
that was a big,
right?
Yeah, that was a big hit. Yeah, you know. So,
right.
But yeah, two great albums there. You know. So, right. So my next pick is Kraftwerk and the Man Machine. So, I mean, I'm not saying this is their best album, but it's certainly the Kraftwerk album that I play most. You know, it's more of a synth pop record. The albums that come before it, likes of Autobahn and Radioactivity and Trans-Europe Express, maybe better albums, I don't know, but this is more immediate. It opens with the Robots, which, I mean, obviously it's catchy. It's basically, a synth pop song, but it's an important song in their catalogue because it's obviously it plays a lot with their image, I suppose, isn't it? You know, that's a subject they keep coming back to, that relationship between man and machine, humans and technology. Obviously, they came back to that again with Tour de France, the whole cycling thing, and it's a fascinating thing. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Kraftwerk.
I did not.
No, okay. So, I mean, if you obviously there's live footage and live albums, but when they play now, when they do their encore, the opening song is normally the Robots when they perform the encore, and it's performed by robots. They leave the stage, and robots are set up to perform this song. You know, so
kind of like ABBA's new tour, or who knew?
That's
the virtual concert.
Yeah, but an incredibly important song in their catalogue. And I say it's got a twinkle in the eye. It's you know, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, and I like that sort of sense of humour about it as well. Obviously with the image that goes alongside it. So yeah, really good stuff. And it's interesting. This is obviously a German copy, so it's all the songs in German. And it was years before I realised that they recorded the songs in German. I actually saw an interview with Nick Rhodes at Duran Duran, and he's been asked about what his favourite albums were, his favourite songs, and he mentioned The Man Machine. And he said, of course, if you listen to Kraftwerk, you've got to listen to those songs performed in German. And I was like, what? It never even dawned on me that you could buy the records in their native language. Of course, they might record it in German, but
I didn't know that till recently either, except for Autobahn, which is really, you know, fun as Autobahn. But you know, I never knew that until just the last 2 or 3 years. So this actually doesn't go. My guess is this album I'm going to show, in this opening track, was probably influenced by that band in a way. And this knocked my socks off when I heard it. This is just celebrated its 20th anniversary. And the opening track is Everything in Its Right Place, Kid A. There's a whole, not even controversy. People sometimes, after the guitar-based songs and OK Computer and Benz, didn't kind of know what to make of this stuff. But this is where I really jumped on board. I had heard their earlier records, but I never really got into them until after the fact. But this one, I remember buying this CD, and in my office, we had a CD player set up, and I put it on, and I literally played that track about 10 times in a row. Just the opening of that was, it doesn't seem very outrageous now, but it just seemed to me, maybe because as much as I'm into electronic music somewhat, and it was just really different for me, and it just sucked me into the whole record. And my son was probably 10, 11 years old when this album came out, and I used to play this in the car all the time. And him and I, this was a record that we bonded with early on. I mean, at 10, maybe not early, but at that age. And it was so great. He always wanted to hear Kid A. He always wanted to hear Radiohead. So this is an important record for that reason, but I just love the opening track.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting looking back now, because as you say, it perhaps doesn't seem that shocking almost, but at the time it was so controversial. The records that came out prior to that, certainly the Bends and OK Computer, big guitar records. So and they appeal to a lot of fans of rock music. And then this comes out. I mean, you listen to Kid A. I listened to it again. I bought the reissue, the Kid Amnesia.
Yeah, me too.
Reissue that came out recently. And you listen to Kid A now, and you get quite a way into the album before you hear a recognizable guitar. You know, it's pretty much electronic and you've got a big bass part on National Anthem quite early on, but that aside, it's pretty much all electronic. So you get a long way into the record. And if you're a fan of OK Computer or the Bends, which is so guitar driven, you know, to hear an album which doesn't have that, it's pretty much totally electronic focused. It must have been quite a shock, but looking back now, we just accept Radiohead. That's what they sound like, isn't it?
I've had a lot of these conversations before about this thing about just recently, obviously talking about Sgt. Pepper, and people they don't slag it off, but okay, I've heard it so many times. But you got, maybe again, because I'm older, but yeah, I'm sure you like Pepper and all these records. But at the time when that album came out, it was so freaking groundbreaking. You can't even imagine how different it was. It was far beyond everything else. I'm not saying Kid A was far beyond what was happening. Maybe in my world, I wasn't gravitating to a lot of that. I had friends that turned me on to electronica and electric music. So I knew Kraftwerk. Autobahn was my intro to them. And that for probably 2 decades, the only album I had by Kraftwerk was Autobahn. I love that record. In fact, I had gotten a promo when it came out, and I just kept playing. It was like a novelty thing. It was just so bizarre and fun. And same with the album Oxygen. Jean-Michel Jarre. No, is that right? Jean-Michel Jarre. I remember that record. I just love that record, and Yellow and those type of artists, you know, at the time. So I love that.
Yep, very cool. Right, okay. Right, so I'm going to go with it. This is David Bowie's album Logic. Now, this is an album which is often overlooked. You know, certainly, obviously, it's part of the Berlin trilogy, albeit it wasn't recorded in Berlin. I think it was recorded in Switzerland, wasn't it? But yeah, I mean, Bowie understood very well, perhaps more than any artist, the importance of sequencing a record. And if you look at any of those 70s albums, they all have really strong starts. I mean, I always think of an opening track as being, you know, your statement of intent. You know, it's your big opening, it's your introduction to the album. And he understood that, whether it be Changes on Hunky Dory or 5 Years on Ziggy Stardust or Heroes, you know, whatever. So, and this opens with Fantastic Voyage. Now, I think Fantastic Voyage is one of his best songs. I think it's sometimes overlooked because this album doesn't necessarily get the attention that it deserves, but this is now one of my favorite Bowie albums. And it probably is my favorite because of through Fantastic Voyage, I kept going back to that song, and in turn kept listening to a little bit more of the album. Then I'd go back and listen to the song again, and then hear a little bit more and a little bit more, until it was an album that I played over and over again on repeat. I think it's a fantastic record, and I say Fantastic Voyage, produced by Tony Visconti, but written by Bowie and Eno together. I think it is one of his best songs, certainly in my top 3 Bowie songs.
I would agree with that album because You know how some records, for whatever reason, by any artist that you're into, that you just start playing over and over and over again. And even though technically another album by an artist might be better or something, but sometimes, and that's one of those albums. I love that album. I think it's a wonderful record. But I remember it's one of those records I kept playing right when it came out, because there was always something I heard different on it, and it was really
Yeah,
interesting. It wasn't as easy in a way, but it's
yeah,
not. To me, it's not that out there either. Maybe at the time, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember a Fantastic Voyage. Definitely,
yeah,
there was something about that, and maybe I was harking back to, as a kid, the movie Fantastic Voyage with Raquel Welch. I don't know, but
oh,
no, right. But I agree. That's a great movie. A great album. I don't know if I would have chosen that. That's an interesting choice, and I love that choice. But so I love the
yeah.
record.
It's not a very immediate record. It's an album you need to spend time with, but I think it benefits for that. You know, it's as you say, it's something that you get more and more from with each listen. You hear something different each time you play it, and yeah, it's a great album. I say it's perhaps the Bowie album that I've played the most over the years. That and Hunky Dory.
I love the cover too, and the smash
Yeah,
face and the glass and all that too. Okay, my next album is from 1985, and this album came out to surprise a lot of people. And of course, I don't remember if he got dropped by Columbia or Columbia just decided, we don't get it. We're not putting that album out. You know, this happens as certain artists age, and they're out of sync with what's happening, especially in the 80s. And to me, the opening of this is Dance Me to the End of Love
mm.
by Leonard Cohen. This album only came out in Canada, probably the UK maybe, but it didn't come out in the States initially. It was printed in Canada on Passport Records, imported to the States. I got my copy again when it came out. Gem Imports, who was an importer of British and overseas records. And it had that electronic, keyboard thing. And, everybody, for the most part, liked his guitar, the folk guitar, or his dark lyrics. This was kind of la da 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 da. It's almost like the German,
Yeah,
beer hall type of song, and it's really a funny song. It's gotten to be. I mean, obviously, uh, his whole career was revitalized when, uh, unfortunately, when his manager stole his money when he was in one of the monasteries for a while, and he literally had to go on the road, and he got a whole new resurgence of young
yeah,
people. And luckily, for us and for him, obviously, and his family, he was. I mean, I love Leonard Cohen, and even the problematic Phil Spector record. I
yeah,
remember playing that all the time too. But I love this "Dance Me to the End of Love," and this is a great album. And of course, the song that nobody really paid attention to on this album is "Hallelujah," until first John Cale covered it first, as far as I know, and then of course we all know the Jeff Buckley version. That all of a sudden it became this sort of anthem, not only as a spiritual thing when moment, but it's so funny that how this religious groups sort of took it upon themselves to become a big thing. But it's really, when you listen to the lyrics and read the lyrics, it's kind of about sexual bondage. You strap
yeah,
me to a chair. I mean, not the whole
yeah.
song, but which maybe religion is too. And I shouldn't probably go there, but love this record. And I think it's a great, joyous opening song.
Yeah, it is. And just what you're saying about Hallelujah there. I remember reading an interview with Leonard Cohen. He's basically saying it took him a year to write that song. And I love that sort of dedication and that attention to detail and just caring out so much care going into every word before he's comfortable in recording it and putting it out. I mean, obviously, whether that just certainly doesn't work for every artist, but yeah, just the way his approach to music, I find absolutely fascinating. But as
Yeah,
you say,
yeah.
I suppose it did change quite late on. As he had that real resurgence, didn't just in a few years before his death, and he recorded a lot of music in a very short space of time, didn't he?
He did, and in a way, he almost whispered it, and it was it became from him becoming a guitar-based folk singer to keyboards and not really synthesizers, but almost recorded at home. And I do love like in his entire career, a lot of times on not every song, but so many of his songs, he supplements his voice with these great female vocals in the background. And from So Long Marianne to, way back early on to his collaborations in his last 10, 20 years. Just love it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I promise I'm not going to show too many soul records, but this is this is James.
You're the soul man.
This is James.
You're the white
Brown.
soul guy.
Well, maybe. This is James Brown with The Payback. So, so this is an interesting record because, I've been listening to a lot of James Brown over this last week or so, and
I've followed your Instagram and all
on Instagram. Yeah, right. Okay. So, a lot of those mid '60s, which are records, are very much just R&B records, straight R&B, and they're wonderful. It's just joyous, uplifting, groovy records. But you get to the late '60s into the early '70s, his sound changes. It starts going into these long, drawn out, just I suppose, funk jams in effect. These songs that go on for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, whatever. These sort of hypnotic grooves, and this is pretty much the pinnacle of that sound for James Brown. Now, this album was recorded as for a film. So he did a soundtrack for a blaxploitation film called Black Caesar. It's a great soundtrack record. And this was meant to be, this was recorded and was meant to be the soundtrack to the follow-up, Hell Up in Harlem. Now, he presented this record to the studio and they rejected it. Now, James Brown always said that the studio didn't think the record was funky enough. Obviously, that's him being tongue-in-cheek, but I think it was down to the fact that all of the songs on this record are so long. It's 8 tracks and it's over 70 minutes in length, so you can tell.
The double record, right?
It's a double record.
Yeah. I remember that.
And every song just goes on and on. And they all get into this groove, and you just continue on that groove for say 7, 8, 9 minutes, whatever. Now, the opening track is the title track, The Payback, and I think this is James Brown at his best. You've got Maceo Parker and Fred Wesley on horns. And as the best way I can describe it is that just hypnotic funk, that thing that James Brown is so well. When you hear it, you know that you're funk. And I say it's a wonderful album, but a perfect opening. Now, I read Questlove's autobiography several years ago now, and he references this album. He basically talks about his father and says, what a music fan he was. Throughout the 60s into the early 70s, he built up this quite large collection of R&B and soul records. But when he bought this record, he didn't understand it. And this record pretty much stopped him buying music. He got to a stage where he heard this album and he felt that he just didn't understand what he was hearing. He didn't see where music was going because, you lost the traditional song structure, that traditional R&B sound. And it became something totally different in the early 70s. And James Brown was at the forefront of that. And you've got these long drawn out hypnotic jams. And it just basically stopped him buying music. I mean, if you listen to this now, it's incredible to think that you could have that effect on somebody because it's such a wonderful record. It's perfect. But it's like what we're saying about Radiohead. At that time, at that moment, it just didn't sit right with people. So, yeah.
I remember I've heard the record, but not probably in the store way back when I was working. I've never owned it. It seems to me that would be a record that I'm sure artists years later would sample possibly.
Oh yeah, it's been sampled to death. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Love it. I need to find that record. It's funny. I don't know, but we don't see a lot of good used James Brown records here in good shape ever. I don't know what it is.
That's because when they come up, people buy them. It's an obvious name. If you want to buy, soul music or funk music, or you're looking for breaks, then James Brown is where you go, isn't it? So if they come up in used stores,
but he did so many records around that time, and of course, obviously the Apollo and the ones people know about. But every single record and the black exploitation stuff, and it's just if I see a copy, it's either really messed up or I don't see them. I see a couple reissues, and I don't mind buying reissues, but for some reason on those, I'm a little suspect about them. But whatever, that's just a personal thing. To me, one of the greatest openings of an album ever is "Running Up That Hill." I just love the rhythm, the percussion, the groove on this, and of course, I have a 12-inch single of this. I love all the 12-inch singles that came out of this record: "Cloud Busting," "Running Up That Hill." It's just Big Sky, all those, the media, what is it, the Meteor Mix or whatever it was called at the time. I fell in love with her. I've said this many times, probably with you too. In '78, my first trip to England, and on the way from Heathrow in the car, my friend's car, I heard Wuthering Heights, and I thought, what is this? It was so bizarre. And the next day, I went to HMV on Oxford Street and bought that single I have today. But Running Up That Hill is such a great groove. Again, the long version is great. The short version is great. A Deal with God. Just, dun, dun. Oh, I can't sing, but we all know what I'm talking about. And of course, Hounds of Love. One of her two best albums. This to me, and this and The Dreaming are my two favorites.
Yeah, no, I mean, just looking at that cover there, Maz, it's a great cover as well. That image on the cover,
right?
Well, both sides.
It's so funny. I'd never realized, for years I listened to this record and I didn't really listen to it and follow the lyrics about this whole thing about drowning and being in the water. And obviously, you look at this shot, it's that. Almost until she did those live shows 5-6 years ago, where I bought that live box set. You see the whole in the water thing, and I read more about it, and I just miss that. I like the mood and her vocals, but I didn't dive into what she was singing about, the storytelling, which is really a shame. I'm ashamed on my part that I didn't, because there's so much going on in this record, and it's so beautiful.
I think she's an artist. Well, so that album, but her work in general. I'd be interested to see or learn more about her songwriting process. There's not much in the way of outtakes or demos that you see. You basically just see the finished product. You don't see anything building up to that. And I think I'd be fascinated to see how she works and how she constructs these.
She seems to be, kind of that Sgt. Pepper mode, but in Pink Floyd mode, where it's really building in the studio. So there's not a lot of leftover things. Maybe she does some passes on a piano of the songs to get a feel and as demos for herself. But also, since she's in control of everything, since she built her own studio, we'll probably never hear the parts and pieces, in her case. I doubt it. That's not her MO, modus operandi. So
very good. Now, my favorite album of hers is the one after that, Essential World. That's my
wow,
personal favorite. So right, anyway, so
I almost picked that too.
Right, so I've said before that all four of the Smiths studio albums, the opening tracks are fantastic. So I could quite easily have picked any one of the four albums, but I've gone with The Queen Is Dead. And it's always a toss-up for me whether this is their best album or the one prior to this, Meat Is Murder. I think those two albums are pretty much perfect. But I say the opening track on this, The Queen Is Dead, it's a real statement. It's an epic in every sense of the world, in sense of the words. The length of it, but just it just feels huge. The sound is massive. Johnny Marr has constructed this almost wall of sound, this wall of guitars. And the drums that come in, it's a big drum sound. It's not an 80s drum sound, but it's a big drum sound. And it just gives you this overall huge sound to this particular track. And Morrissey's vocal and lyric, as ever at this point in his career, is fantastic, totally unique. It could only be one band. And I think it's just a perfect start to this album. And it's a great record. It goes from that into Frankie Mr. Shankly, I Know It's Over, Never Had No One Ever, Cemetery Gates. Just a brilliant record.
That's probably my favorite Smiths album. It's that opening track. It's such an audacious opening. It's almost an assault in a way. And I don't mean in terms of a fast rock and roll song. It's because it's not that, but it's an intense piece of music. The first thing I ever heard, I remember having, I can't remember, I missed it. Obviously, it was a CD, I guess. Maybe it wasn't a CD, or I had a cassette of it or something. But I remember hearing, didn't hear the singles, but I heard Reel Around a Fountain, which opens up their debut. I fell in love with that song. I thought it was the most bizarre, self-deprecating, Reel Around the Fountain, Slap Me in the Patio, kind of a mundane, on and on, time the tale we're told. And I just remember loving that. I had this this woman I know, young. Well, I was in my 20s, I guess, late 20s, early 30s, whatever it was. And I brought her. We took a drive, and I said, "You got to hear this song." And it wasn't a romantic thing, but I played it, and she didn't get it right away because it's not the thing you play for. So, oh, this is a beautiful song, but "Reel Around the Fountain." So that I almost picked that or the one you chose on that.
Yeah.
But and Alain Delon, the French actor on the cover, is cover star on that. So
cover star.
I'm into that whole. You know me. I'm into that photo thing. So okay. This is one of two of the most obvious choices that, to me, if you say great opening track, an assault on a record, it sets the stage for everything. Another great, if it's not a guitar, it's a percussive opening, and that is Sympathy for the Devil. What a fantastic, I mean, this is an amazing, 1968, one of the most violent years in this country for a lot of reasons. And that song, shout out who killed the Kennedys, after all, it was you and me. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. We all know the song. We don't know the album. I don't have to say much about it. But this version, I mean, I like the Get Your Ya-Ya's Out version, but obviously you're missing that percussion. And that, to me, like, just that sets the tone for this album. And for this is my favorite Stones album. And that's probably Sympathy for the Devil is my favorite Rolling Stones song.
It's the percussion that makes that song. It's the percussion that makes it.
Yeah. And the guitar, the guitar riff, that stop and start, I guess that's Keith. I don't think it's Brian. That whatever you do, I can't do it, but what a great record.
It's a song that hasn't really dated. It still feels relevant and fresh now. It doesn't feel like it's dated.
Well, especially the way the world is right now, it's very powerful, definitely.
Yeah, right. I wasn't going to show this, but I am going to put this. So you're talking about obvious choices. This is a really obvious
Don't
choice.
they talk about that record?
Yeah, and that's why I wasn't going to pick it, because in High Fidelity, one of the 5 that John Cusack's character picks is Smells Like Teen Spirit, and he's pulled up for it for being too obvious, so. But the reason I'm picking this is because I can't think of a song which changed music or people's opinion or approach to music as much as Smells Like Teen Spirit. And I'll explain myself there. So prior to that, in the late 80s, early 90s, the sort of music I listened to was very much rock music, a lot of, I don't know, sort of hair metal, that sort of stuff. That's what a lot of my friends listened to. This one song blew all that entire genre out of the water in one fell swoop. It made everything sound old and tired. And all those bands lost their deals straight away because it all sounded like old hat. And I remember playing this album and looking at my record collection and not knowing what to play next because it just sounded different to absolutely everything else that I owned. So from that point of view, and that one track, that has an absolutely enormous effect on me. Now, I didn't go down the route of listening to this type of music. All it did was change what I was listening to. I then discovered soul music or whatever. But this was the catalyst for me stepping away from a type of music and a scene that I was very much into and discovering something new, albeit this was just the record that broke that habit, and then I found something new. But an absolutely brilliant record from start to finish. Okay, I mean, many Nirvana fans will say that either the debut or In Utero are better records. I know this is the most commercial record, but it's, that's part of what makes it so good. It is a commercial record. It sounds huge. It's produced by Butch Vig. All of these songs sound great on the radio now, but yeah, a brilliant record.
I think that Nirvana is their best album. I think, and then the first one, then Utero maybe after that. But I would agree with that. That is an obvious choice, but it's a great choice. And my next album is probably the ultimate. Go ahead.
Sorry, Madge. I just want to make one more point there, just about this. And it's just about 1991 in general. Within about a 6-week period, you had this album come out. On the same day, you had A Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory. The day before this came out, you had Screamadelica, Primal Scream. A week before, you had the 2 Use Your Illusion albums, Guns N' Roses. You had Metallica's Black Album. You had Pearl Jam 10. And I think about a month before this came out, you had Blue Lines by Massive Attack. So within a 5 or 6 week period, you had about 10 absolutely huge records, which still significant today. I mean, perhaps you could scrub out the usual illusions, whatever, but from that moment in time, they are all key records.
And at the end of 90, my son was born. So there we go. So I was listening to that stuff there. To me now, this is probably one of the top 3 singles that opens up this record. One of the top 3 singles, definitely from the 1960s, and possibly one of the greatest singles ever released in the history of our planet and our universe. That's a lot to, right? Do you know what that would be? What would you guess for that?
God knows.
Okay.
All right. What do you got? Bob Dylan.
Like a Rolling Stone, yes.
There you go, right.
I mean, an obvious choice, but the way that drum hits and it goes into that song for, was it 5 minutes or whatever it is? I mean, it's a long song for the radio. I know, and at least when I was growing up, they were playing the whole full version most of the time, which was outrageous in those days. When something was over maybe 2 minutes 45, they got a little nervous, but they played this. It's an assault. I got the cutting edge box set, which is all the outtakes from everything he recorded in 65 and 66, which is totally outrageous. And there's something like, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 versions of this. And what makes me even love Bob Dylan more and how his brilliance of every version is almost completely different in different time signatures and in different arrangements, musically, instrumentally. And this is what he picked the right one. And him and Bob Johnston, who produced this, who also produced, I think, that Johnny Cash record, actually, got the right song. They picked the right one. Now, it's easy for us to say 50 years after the fact, we heard it all the time, but you hear all these other versions. There's either some weird organ or some guitar, Mike Bluefield. And to me, what also makes is that Al Cooper, almost Calliope style organ, that revolving organ on this.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic record. It's an amazing opening to one of the best pop, rock, folky albums ever made, in my opinion. And what a great opener, and one of the great singles ever. I would put in that category Good Vibrations and Strawberry Fields.
I think that's a totally different video, Mazzy. It's a different video. That it's a different conversation.
You're right.
Right. Okay. My last soul or funk record is Parliament and Mothership Connection. Now, the opening track on this is P-Funk Wants to Get Funked Up. Now, this, if anybody wants to know where to start with P-Funk, Parliament Funkadelic, any of that whole sort of movement, the whole genre, this is the album to start with. It's a flawless album for me, and this is a big thing for me. It's a big Saturday night record. From start to finish, it's just a good time record, So, and this, the opening track, P-Funk Wants to Get Funked Up, it's a P-Funk anthem. It's in fact, I've got the live album to hand here as well. This came out a couple of years later, and they opened their live set with it, and it's key because, as you can see on the album cover, this is basically George Clinton on a spaceship there, the mothership, and the way that the live show started was the mothership would come down above the stage, and he would come out the mothership. Now, all of the Parliament and Funkadelic records had a theme. They're all concept albums in effect, and to quote George Clinton, his idea was, his question was, what would it be like if you put black people in space? That's to quote George, and that's basically what he said. You've got the spaceship there with George Clinton sitting on the bonnet like a Cadillac. That's his idea, So, and it's just a good fun time record. As I say, the opening track is a P-Funk anthem. I mean, all of the albums around this sort of mid-70s period that they made are fantastic, just good time records. Great band as well. At this point, you had Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker from James Brown's band joining Parliament as well. And the horn lines throughout this record are brilliant. Just really add that funk to the record. So yeah, if you're interested in P-Funk, that's the place to start.
I love that record. And I actually saw one of those tours because one of my good buddies worked for Polygram in this country. So I'd get like at the stuff I was getting from him were the Donna Summer records, Casablanca records, the Kiss records,
Yeah.
and the Parliament Funkadelic. Unfortunately, a lot of my when I got rid of a portion of my collection mid '90s, I got rid of it, but I've been getting them back.
Yeah.
But he should have asked, in terms of Black people in space, he probably should have asked Sun Ra, who was from Saturn, as we know.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
exactly.
They should have got together, really, shouldn't they?
Right. I wonder if they're. It seems to me they would have met. I mean, how can they not?
Yeah.
Right. That whole
Yeah.
thing would have been great. I have two, but I'm only showing one because I wasn't sure which one I'm going to end with, and I realized the one I'm not showing, so you'll never know. This is to me one of the great openings, and it's a country rock thing. And what makes it special, not only the great songs and the great harmonies of the two singers, but the fact that this came out, posthumous album that came out not long after the artist died. And the title of the album and the title of the song just makes it more powerful because of the death. And that's Return of the Grievous Angel by Graham Parsons. That song that opens up, every time I hear that song with Graham and Emmylou singing those harmonies, it moves me. It's a gorgeous harmony, great song, great arrangement. It's like 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 19 seconds. Sorry. But it's, to me, this is a perfect album of country rock. Graham Parsons, it has become the Grievous Angel. It's almost one of his nicknames, and obviously from the Byrds and International Submarine Band, Flying Burrito Brothers, and on and on and on. Tempestuous fellow, a lot of demons, but really was one of several, not the only, that really merged the country thing and pushed these traditional singer and songwriters or musicians like the Louvin brothers into rock and roll music, helping with Sweetheart of the Rodeo, which is a fantastic album that literally bombed when it came out. No one got it at the time, and it's become such an influential album. But this, to me, I think if you have to pick one album aside from that, and unfortunately on the original version of Sweetheart, a lot of his vocals were removed because of contractual reasons. You get the expanded edition. You get both Roger McGuinn and his version. But to me, this is the one to have. And GP, which came before it, is a beautiful record too. But Return of the Grievous Angel, what a great farewell in a way. Who would have known, right? So that's my end bit.
Have you got the tribute album that Emmylou Harris put together in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I have a CD of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, CD.
Yeah.
That's a love. I mean, those sort of tribute albums normally can be quite disjointed. They don't necessarily flow that well. But I think that that tribute record that, say, Emmylou put together, I think is so well done. Great versions of the song, which obviously she appears on many of them as well with the artists. Yeah, really good.
That could be a video sometime. I have tons of, mostly in CD, tribute albums. I was really all in on everything from the various Leonard Cohen versions to the Graham Parsons to the that whole series that the Disney and the Monk and the what's his name, who just died the last 2 years, that would put together this series of records, and with Tom Waits and all those people. But I love that stuff too. So this was a great idea.
There you go.
Now I have to go watch High Fidelity again.
If you need any ideas, just give me a call. That's right.
Well, you have the ideas. Go ahead.
So there you go. Right. So the Kinks, Muswell Hillbillies. So in the UK, the Kinks had a string of hit singles up until 1970. The singles from the Lola album, so 8 Man and Lola, of course, they were big hits. But after that, throughout the 70s, they didn't have any more hits. Now, this I'm right in saying this is the record that followed Lola, isn't it?
Yes. That's when they switched in this country. In this country, they left Warner Brothers Reprise and went to RCA.
Right. Okay. Now this album, it opens with 20th Century Man, isn't it? And that particular song, that got me into the period of the Kinks after they stopped having hits in the UK. Those early 70s records, I love those records. And it's all down to this one song, really. The structure of the song is quite strange because it builds very slowly. And then you have the middle eight, the I Was Born in a Welfare State section. And then the end part, it just builds and builds and builds and gets rockier and rockier. The vocal is more intense. It's a real rock vocal, full-on rock vocal, a brilliant vocal performance. And I suppose it's similar to what I was saying about Fantastic Voyage. That one song pulled me into the rest of the record.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I kept playing it and then getting a bit further through the album, then a bit further through the album, until this is now one of my favorite Kinks records. So not Prince records, Kinks records. That's something very different.
Ray Davis is probably the furthest of Prince of any.
I think so, yeah. But
Right.
yeah, a brilliant album. And I say the subject matter as well, this feeling of being a man at a time where technology and the world is moving on and you think you're not moving with it. So it's a great theme. And I think it's one of the Kinks' best songs.
I almost picked Arthur from Victoria, because I love that opening of. So I'm throwing in another one without even showing an album, like I'm cheating. But I thought of the Kinks, obviously favorite band, but to me the opening of Victoria and Arthur is what a great opening. I just love that song. So
yeah,
that's a good choice. And that in a way is like, it's funny. It's called Muscle Hillbillies. It's almost like they're a country record at times too. Yeah. And they started getting into that whole with that, and then the live album, Everyone's a Dreamer or whatever, Everyone's a Star, and they get into this whole New Orleans style horns, mixed in at that point when they were touring around that time. I saw them after that when they were doing like soap opera and that period, which a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like the theatrical Stones of Preservation Hall and all that. But I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting mix. As you say, it's got a very much a sort of New Orleans-y vibe in places, but it's certainly very English as well. You've got tracks like Have a Cup of Tea, Skin and Bone.
That's true. That's true.
Very, very English sounding.
I keep thinking, because I think they toured, and if you watch some of those, like, what's the German show? Beat Club. And there you see the horn sections, or some of the UK shows, and you see this big horn section, and those arrangements are right out of the New Orleans kind of, type of thing. Some of the stuff, how they arrange it, and again on the live album too. The live album has some of the cuts from that album. In fact, it's one studio album, one live album.
That's right. Everybody Wants to Be a Star. Is that the album?
Yep. Yeah. Not every. Some showbiz.
Everybody's in show business.
Yeah, everybody's in showbiz, and it's got that great song. It's funny. I don't know if you watch the Marvel shows or the Avengers or any of that. They use it. What is that song? And not Intergalactic Rocket Ship or something. Rocket Ship is in that film with Thor. They go to the town of Thor and they're playing that song from that album. So it's kind of great to hear some Kinks being pushed in front of the new audiences, because they don't get a lot of love in some venues, in some areas anymore. So anyway, okay. I'm going to end this and hang in there for a minute. I want to say, but thanks for watching, and thanks, John. There's a link below to John's channel, and it's not all soul and R&B, but he probably knows more about that than anyone I know. And that's a great place to watch his videos and his conversation. So Mazzy loves you, and John.
Cheers.